What's up, everybody? It's Peter Tragos, the lawyer you know, and today we're finally getting the interview we've been talking about for weeks. I actually already did the interview, so I know how it went, and it went really well. It was really interesting. We learned a lot. So if you listen to this interview, you can learn a lot about what it's like to be a public defender and what it was like to represent Chandler Halderson throughout this trial, because we have Vera, his defense attorney, coming on the show today to talk through a lot of what we talked about in our videos and in our comments and our chat during that trial. She responds to a lot of it, talks about a lot of it, talks about how it made her feel, how it even affected the trial and kind of came into the trial a little bit. And it was a really interesting conversation that'll let you behind the scenes a little bit about what it's like to defend someone like this and to handle a trial like this and to be a public defender in this situation. All right, Crystal, thanks so much for joining us. I know it takes a brave soul to jump in and realize why we're talking to you today, what case you're connected with. It was interesting, to say the least, to hear the story, to watch the trial. People had their thoughts. And whenever we have a case that we try and we go to jury selection and we talk to potential jurors about cases, there are certain cases we know. Every person that does not know us personally is going to think some sort of way or feel some type of way about us, for sure, just based on what they've heard and the charges that are read to them before we even start jury selection. So in Chandler Halderson's case, that's the position you were in. So can you tell us a little bit about how you deal with that, what that's like, just the charges and having that type of attention on a case like that?
So that wasn't my first homicide case, but it definitely was my first homicide case that had that much media attention to it. And we kind of knew that it was going to happen because of the type of charge. And I wouldn't even say the charges. I think, the story, if you will, I think made it a little more juicy, for lack of better terms, as far as people wanting to get involved in it. So it was a big deal, obviously, in Madison where it happened, and we were expecting the local news to deal with it and to address it, but we weren't expecting it to get any kind of national attention. So when it did get that national attention, that's when we kind of were a little concerned about how things would go. And we did try to limit the live streaming aspect of it. And we did that for appellate purposes and for trial purposes in general. But it was a strange position to be in. I never thought that I would be in that kind of position, just because, it's Madison, Wisconsin. It's not California. It's not, or Florida, it's not a big state.
You think, why do people care about this stuff? But people are sadistic.
Exactly. Yeah.
They love stuff like this. I mean, that's just, it boggles my mind why people watch and talk about these kinds of cases or this stuff in general, or how anybody listens to us talk about the law or cases that are in trial, but they do. So you mentioned the live stream aspect. What was it like in the courtroom to have, did you have to set up things differently for where the cameras were? What did they tell you about the cameras? Did you have to wear mics? Was the courtroom mics, is that what they were picking up as well? Okay.
Yeah. So that was probably the worst thing of it. So the setup of the camera, there's a room, a media room, each courtroom, or I shouldn't say each courtroom, but this courtroom in particular had a media room. So we never had to deal with the camera and never had to deal with people revolving the camera. What was super different and what was very challenging, especially from the defense standpoint, was the mics. They were very sensitive. They were picking up everything. And I'm not someone that has to use the mic when I'm in a courtroom. I can project just fine. So using the mics was something to get used to. But then we had investigators. We have our own office investigators. We had one of them that was sitting next to us. That I think a lot of people were like, who's that? That was one of our investigators. And then we had another one that was watching one of the live streams to make sure that the rules that the judge had set out were followed.
Oh, wow.
And to also make sure that if there was anything as far as the live stream itself, that, if there was anything that we should be aware of. So we found out through that way that the mic was super sensitive and was picking up just about everything. So we ended up having to be very cognizant of that, which we couldn't really deal with it. We tried to, again, we brought it up and tried to deal with it, but we had to adjust to it. So anytime we had to have a conversation with ourselves, we had to be super aware and cognizant that the mic was there. So that's why we had sticky notes. I think a lot of people noticed the sticky notes. We were doing that just to make sure that everything remained confidential. Any conversation that we had with Chandler, we had to make sure that it was nowhere near the mic. So that was very difficult to deal with. And on a personal standpoint, I never use the lapel mic whenever I'm in trial. Ever. No, I usually project. Like, I don't have any problem projecting. But for this trial, we had to do that because of the cameras. So I think at some point, like, I was putting the lapel mic during my closing, and I made a noise, and everyone thought that I made it with my mouth, but it was with my hands or something. So, like, little things like that are things that I do not think about when I have a case. Or, for example, my water. Like, I get thirsty when I talk.
Sure.
And for my closing, I had a coffee cup that had water in it. I was just using the coffee cup because I didn't have anything else. And a lot of people, picked up on that. So I had a trial maybe 2 weeks after Halderson where I did the same thing. And I made a purpose of saying, there's water in this cup. I'm going to be drinking some water out of this cup. So things like that, we never paid attention to. I never had to pay attention to. And it was very strange having to accommodate, not for the jury, but for the outside world. We were making accommodations for the outside world.
Yeah. I mean, in every trial, we've got to accommodate for the judge, the jury, the court reporter, the witnesses. And a lot of people ask questions like, why do they lean over and touch that button on the microphone? Because it's a mute button, because whatever you say in the mic, the court can hear, everybody can hear, especially as a defense attorney. They don't want to hear our conversations. We don't want them to hear our conversations. So that just adds a whole other level, having the lapel mic. I mean, that's really something that is a balance between letting the public view a trial, which they have a right to do, and protecting your client's constitutional rights, and I think that's an interesting balance when we talk about in the YouTube world, because people are just glued to this stuff and watching these live streams. We have to be careful that what we pick up, and media, they'll do anything they can with anything they get, however they can get it. So sometimes that can kind of be a dangerous thing that you set up.
For sure.
Was Chandler a chatty client or no?
So we used sticky notes as our primary form of conversation because of the mics. So anytime you saw him with a sticky note, he was commenting about something. He was letting us know about something.
Yeah, I mean, because some clients talk nonstop throughout the trial, talk your ear off, pull your arm, write your notes, whatever. And then some I've had sit there and don't say a word throughout the whole trial. So every client's really different how they sit through trial. And I always find it interesting depending on how they are.
Yeah, for sure. That was another thing that with the media attention, any little thing that was done was going to be scrutinized. So sometimes he wasn't talking enough. Sometimes he was talking too much. Sometimes he did this. Sometimes he did that. Or sometimes we did this. Sometimes we did that. Which again, I looked at the comment sections of various feeds, which looking back, I probably shouldn't have, but I wanted.
It's never good to check the comments.
It's never good.
I can't even check the comments of my own videos. They're brutal. I can't imagine for other people.
And to be fair, some are really funny.
Yeah, I agree.
I can laugh at myself. That's no problem. Some are very okay, you just don't know what's going on.
Sure.
But I use it kind of as a tool too, to see, okay, are some people understanding what we're trying to get? Are people noticing something that we're not noticing? Because it was kind of the 13th. I mean, I think there was 14 total jurors. So the camera did become essentially an extra juror. So if there was something that they were noticing, we wanted to address that too, but it wasn't a happy balance with what.
Well, it does make it really hard when you take that into account, because you can't help yourself as a human being when you have some very normal, very cool people that watch and give their opinion, and then some people that are just off their rocker, And it's like, you've got to determine as a lawyer for what's best for your client. You can't please everybody, obviously. And
Exactly. Yeah.
you've got the jury you have. You don't have the world, as your jury making the decision for your client. But that is really difficult. And I know that you mentioned it, at least in closing, the media attention that the case was getting in the trial. And, what was your worry as far as what the jury was listening to, hearing? Because it does. They are people. We tell them not to, yet we as lawyers in trial know that it's highly unlikely for a trial that lasts more than one day that a juror is not going to at least talk to their husband or boyfriend or girlfriend or daughter or mother or aunt or uncle or Google or open up their phone, especially if they're geo-mapped to live where you are, and it just gets in front of their face. How did you deal with that?
So that was our biggest concern, and something that we wanted the jury sequestered. It didn't happen, and it's fine. It is what it is. But, and I'm sure when you've done a closing, sometimes you're getting really super into it, and your mouth is moving faster than you can process and think. And at some point, I was commenting about the media, and I did say something that I think a lot of people took as me calling or being disrespectful to the jury about the media. And I actually ended up talking to one of the jurors this morning. So
interesting.
That was, I like to do that in general if I can.
Whenever you can. Oh yeah,
exactly. You
it's
learn.
Great.
It's awesome. You learn so much by being able to talk to jurors. So what I was trying to do was exactly what you were just saying. Like, I find it hard to believe that no one in this room didn't even get like a notification of something, or wasn't watching the Packers game and saw something in the background. Not that they were intentionally looking for information, but that information was just thrown their way. So every time that the judge, and I don't believe this part was recorded by the cameras. But every time the judge would ask, has anyone seen anything in the news, heard anything, whatever, no one said anything. So we were surprised, because we were expecting people to be like, oh, hey, I was, at the grocery store and someone mentioned something about this case. Or I got a text message from a friend about something. So that's what we were concerned, was just that you already have to deal with that in general, and now it's being live streamed and everyone is going to be involved, and you don't know what ends up influencing these jurors, and you don't know what they end up hearing. So that was what I was trying to address, which just didn't come out the right way, but that was our biggest concern.
And when you sit down after closing, you always think, oh, I could have done this part better or that part better. And you're trying to be honest is really, I think, what you're trying to say when you say your mouth's moving faster than you're thinking. You're just trying to have an honest conversation with the jury. Like, you're not bad people if you saw something on the news, but you probably saw something on the news that said this horrible psycho killer kid chopped his parents up. And it's like, listen, you can't bring that into the trial. You've got to look at the actual evidence in the case. You got to look at the facts that were presented. You got to see if the state met their burden. That's all you're trying to do there. But again, when it's being scrutinized and picked, apart, then they're obviously going to find stuff like that. But I think sometimes when you're trying to be honest with the jury, it doesn't sound as lawyerly, which is the same as, I know a lot of people also talked about cursing in closing and in the courtroom in general. Go ahead.
So Dane County, Wisconsin, or I shouldn't say Wisconsin, but Dane County, Madison is very informal. So I have the pleasure of getting away with informalities that if I practice in a different jurisdiction, I probably wouldn't.
Sure.
I talk to my jury like they're my friends, and I'm talking to them about this case. Hey, I have this case. These are the facts, and this is why I think that my client should be found not guilty. I don't talk about it in a traditional quote unquote lawyerly way. So do I curse every now and then? Yes. I don't remember dropping an F-bomb. I do not remember that, but several people have said that I did, so I'll believe that. But that's, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to consider it, that is my style. That is something that I'm, even in jury selection too. Like, I don't think you necessarily need to treat the jury like they're sensitive individuals. They're people, and they've, they're going to hear things, and I like to treat them as if I'm just having a conversation with them.
And every juror is different. There was probably a juror that loved it and a juror that hated it.
Exactly.
Just like a juror that's going to love when you say something else and hate when you say something else. I mean, if you
Exactly.
just take 14 people or 12 people, they're not all going to feel the same about everything. And exactly what you're saying about courtrooms makes a big difference. I think people do have expectations of lawyers, which comes into play.
For sure.
But like here, I can, in the same courthouse, go in one courtroom and we sit down, we object, we talk to the judge while we're sitting down. And the other one, we got to stand up to do everything. We can't move away from the podium. In the same courthouse, different judges. You know, that's
Exactly,
just,
yeah.
every judge is a little bit different. And this judge specifically, people seem to love. And in sentencing specifically, I thought he had a lot of nice things to say about you and your co-counsel and the prosecutors. He said everybody did a good job and the lawyers did their jobs. And just for the people listening, there are a lot of things you can't talk about while case is on appeal. This case is going to go up to appeal. We know there are going to be things said about what Crystal did, her co-counsel did, what the counsel did throughout the trial. So we can't hit on some specifics that would become, controversial with that. But specifically just with the judge and dealing with him on this case, are you in front of him a lot?
Yes. So Judge Highland, I think Dane County just has 8 judges,
Okay.
not total, but just criminal
Criminal?
judges. So yeah, I'm in front of Judge Highland a lot. I have nothing bad to say about Judge Highland as far as overall him as a judge. Just like any judge, does he make what I would consider bad rulings for me? Yeah. Does he make good rulings for me too? Absolutely. He is, I would definitely say I'm more comfortable in his courtroom because of how he is. Absolutely. Which, like you said, each courtroom is different. Each judge is different. The bow ties, that's him. Ever since I've ever been in his courtroom, he has the bow ties on.
Yeah.
Which I think a lot of people seem to enjoy.
It's not as unusual down. And I went to Florida State in Tallahassee. I mean,
Yeah.
it's bow ties. I was weird for not wearing them there.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think he's the only judge that may have a bow tie, or that wears them regularly.
He
but
just
we
has
have
a great disposition,
Right. Yeah. And we have an attorney in the office that wears bow ties regularly. So it's hit or miss. But Judge Highland is, I think people, his impression or people's impressions of him is for the most part correct.
Right. And as criminal defense lawyers, the judges are usually not going to be on our side, whether we like them or not. I'm friends with judges that I feel like are against me all the time in trial. Some judges I helped get elected where I'm like, what are you doing in a trial?
Yeah.
I'm like, that's not how the rules are.
And Judge Highland used to be a criminal defense attorney himself.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So sometimes, and we talk about this, we've been like coworkers. I've heard and I've noticed sometimes when someone comes from a defense background, they maybe tend to switch a little bit because they don't want to seem super friendly to the defense and vice versa. So
I've never felt the vice versa. We've
right.
got a lot of prosecutors that are judges here now, and I don't feel the vice versa.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And like, I mean, it's being made a big deal right now with the Supreme Court. So yeah, no, it's interesting as far as rulings and how every judge is different. Judge Highland is, I think people got him spot on as far as just how he is. I will say, that he is one of when it comes to sentencing with our clients, and I'm not just talking about the sensitivity of victims, but like our actual, like the people that I represent, he is very cognizant and nice to our clients too. A lot of judges are not like that, unfortunately.
Well, and we just talked about it in another video on another case about how you're saying his experiences as a criminal defense lawyer and having clients, judges that have had clients tend to do that and think about how it affects the clients, whether they agree with them or not, especially when they're presumed innocent. Some judges, it's like, it's all about judicial economy, or it doesn't really matter, or they're probably going to get convicted because they've never had a client before. They've always represented their company or the state. And it's like, when you have real people as clients, they should be taken into account when we're making decisions about delays or what we're going to do in a case or a trial. Like it's their tax dollars, that are paying for all this too, when we talk about judicial economy. So I think that's good when you have, somebody that's had clients before making these decisions like this judge, but also when you mentioned the Supreme Court nominee, and having clients is just a really good piece of experience that all lawyers that are judges should have, in my opinion.
I agree with you.
So when talking about that again, and just the experience specifically as a PD, so you reached out to me on Instagram. That's kind of how we first started. And it was a very honest message, just kind of talking about what's going on, what's out there, how people are talking about it, and how you wanted people to know certain things, which I tried to relay in a video post to the Instagram messages about how rules are different in different jurisdictions. You can do certain things, you can't do other things. A lot of stuff happens pre-trial that you don't see, that then when you see it in the trial, you've already fought for certain things that you can't fight for now in trial because the decision has been made, which we talked about all of that. But talk about what it's like to be a PD, because I do think PDs get a bad rap. I will just say there are some really horrible PDs. There are some good PDs. There are some really horrible private defense lawyers. There are some really good private defense lawyers. So we're not going to sit here and say every PD is good, but let's talk about what the life is like for a PD, what makes it more difficult than a private lawyer, and what makes it better. Because everybody that's PD that I know thinks there are actual like real benefits and they like it better. Now, maybe you go out for the money eventually, but just as far as what the work is and what your work style and environment is like, that you actually think is better.
Yeah. So I don't think I completely agree with you. There are some awful PDs. There are some wonderful PDs. Some of the best trial attorneys that I've seen are public defenders, and some of the worst trial attorneys that I've seen are public defenders too. But that happens in private practice and in the PD world. I think the biggest thing is there's a giant misconception that public defenders in general just, I wouldn't say we do it for the money, but it's like, oh, it doesn't matter what happens because regardless, they're going to get paid. And I'll tell you that if there was a job that I could just do and get paid, I would not pick being a public defender. Like that's the last thing I would do, because there's more to it. And then I think the other, misconception is that perhaps we are of a lower quality than a private attorney. So several clients that I've had, and because they've had family members that have a really bad public defender or have just had really bad experiences, come into the system with that. And I've always, they'll be like, well, I'm going to end up getting a paid attorney, or I'm going to get a real lawyer.
Right.
So you're kind of having to explain the only difference between me and a private attorney is that I choose to do this work that does not have to deal with money per se, whereas a private attorney does. So it's difficult because we can't necessarily defend ourselves, as far as just in general. Like I don't think a defense attorney in general is necessarily allowed to defend themselves for client privileges, all of that. Being a public defender is hard. It is not an easy job. What makes it difficult is that we're juggling a giant workload. And I know people will say, caseload or workload. Cases don't necessarily matter because sometimes you have clients that have like 10 cases. So if you're just counting cases, that's something. But the workload, we do have a bigger workload because we are providing a service that is guaranteed by the Constitution. Does that mean that it's any, the attention that I give to a case is going to be any different than a private attorney? I don't think so. I would like to think not. But certainly if I'm a private attorney, I have just more time to devote to something. That part, as far as public defenders are overworked and underpaid, that is a very true statement. But as far as the quality of attorney, and I just, it bothers me when people think that a public defender automatically means, what's the saying, a public pretender, like it's a lesser quality attorney, when it can be, but it has nothing to do with whether they're a private or public defender. It just has everything to do with that person and how they decide that they want to run their practice.
What's funny for me is so I do mostly personal injury. That's mostly what I do. My dad does all criminal defense. When I started, I did a lot of criminal. I still do a little bit of criminal, but the majority of what I do is PI. And, that's free lawyers too, right? We get paid in the settlement at the end if we're successful. And there is something to how people treat you when they're not paying you, right? And there are some really great clients and some really awful clients.
Yeah.
And it is really something. I think people will be surprised because back in the day, being a lawyer was a certain kind of respected profession that I think it's a little bit less. And I think some of the TV and billboard lawyers are responsible for that because they're
Mm-hmm.
banging down doors and begging for cases, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so I think there is a part of that. But I do always think it's funny. Like, I don't know if you've followed the Vallow Daybell case over in, I don't know, some other state where they're charged with murdering their children or something, and everybody's crying out. She has her own lawyer that she picked and paid for, but it's a
Mm-hmm.
death penalty case. And everybody's
Okay.
like, well, she needs a death penalty certified lawyer. Oh, good. This is the guy we got that's a death penalty. So now she has a real lawyer who's qualified to take her case. And what is he? He's a PD. And I try
Yeah.
to tell people, do you know most of the death penalty certified
Our
lawyers
public
are PDs?
defenders. Yeah.
Like the experience, I mean, the amount of cases you try as a public defender is just astronomical compared to a private lawyer. And
For
again, there
sure.
can be positives and negatives to that. The overworked part, sure, that's hard, but you get a lot of experience to where you're in the courtroom. If you're doing some little misdemeanor DUI, it's a lot easier and quicker. You can just prep, you know what's going to happen, you know what the experts are, than somebody who's
Mm-hmm.
trying 2 cases a year, 2 DUIs a year, to where you're doing 20.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
Mm-hmm.
there's an experience factor there, I think, with public defenders that get a bad rap. And I think that the hardest thing to kind of come across is a public defender that doesn't care and does fall into the stereotype
Mm-hmm.
is what is so bad for the profession and shines
Mm-hmm.
so bright and is so hard to get through.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, if people aren't paying for you, that's
Mm-hmm.
a hurdle to get over because they just don't see the value in it because they're not paying you for it. If they were paying you a lot of money, they would think, oh, you must be good because I'm paying you a lot of
A
money.
lot of money. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's just a misconception that's, I think, in all facets of life, really. And a lot of time people think you get what you pay for is what
Mm-hmm.
people say with public defenders too. That's really not a fair rap. And I think there's two ways to respond to it as a public defender. Some of them sink in and make the clients right and say, you know
Mm-hmm.
what? You think I suck? Fine, I'll suck. What do I care? And then that client tells people whatever. And the other ones that want to show, no, I'm really
Mm-hmm.
good. I don't care what you say to me. It's like what I feel when PI clients are
Mm-hmm.
sometimes brutal to me from time to time. I'm like, you know what?
Yeah.
Speak how you want to me. I'm going to fight hard for your case. I'm going to maximize your case. I'm going to change your mind. So at the end of the case, you feel this way and whatever. And I'm sure you've had clients that at the end of the case are like, I want you. If this ever happens to me again, free or not, I want you to be
Yeah.
my lawyer. Like you
Yeah.
have to have
No.
clients that feel that way.
Yeah. And I have. And I always get asked, like, of those clients, like, man, why don't you go into public work or private work? Why don't you do that? And
Mhm.
I just don't want to is the answer. And they're surprised whenever I say that. I'm glad you brought up the aspect of caring. I think a lot of people think that public defenders don't care about their clients, simply because we're forced to have these cases. And you know, bringing it back to this case in particular, that was a lot of comments that I saw. Like, never once was I afraid to sit next to this man. Never once did I not want to be there because of this man. Like, I treat all of my clients the exact same way as this case, whether it's a life sentence or just a 9-month sentence. Like, this affects your life, regardless of how it affects mine. Certainly, there are clients that are super appreciative, and then there are clients that think simply because I'm an appointed attorney, a public defender, that they get to kind of walk all over me or walk all over us. At the end of the day, I think being a public defender, you have to be okay with knowing that it's a thankless job sometimes. Um, but that one thank you that you do get means so much. And it also is, you know, one of the questions that you sent to me, like, our clients probably, because we can't choose, are going to be the ones that are that do these more heinous crimes, if you will. And the the judgment, if you will, that we get simply because we represent these people is not something. It's a different kind of judgment than if you were a paid attorney and you chose to accept this case. You know, whether it's more noble or whatever. That was another thing that I kind of noticed with the difference. You know, with the comment section and wrapping it back here. It's a super thankless job, but it's a super rewarding job too.
Yeah, I mean, I think for private lawyers to say, "Oh, they just do it for the money, they're a sellout," or it's understandable because they do it for money, or maybe they're worse because they
Mm-hmm.
chose to take the case. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's the other thing about it is for anybody to ascribe the actions of a criminal defendant to a public defender, they
Mm-hmm.
really don't understand the process. You really don't understand the process. Like
Mm-hmm.
choosing or not, because in all reality, you do choose to represent these people, right? You
Yeah.
you do make a choice. You
Yeah.
know that you're going to represent the Chandler Haldersons of the world, and
Yeah.
other people like him worse, better, whatever.
Yeah.
The point is, you're choosing to provide them with a service that everybody, I think, that watches these would want. Like you want these constitutional protections. You want to be able to have a trial. You want to be
Mm-hmm.
able to have a trained professional who went to law school and knows what they're doing and has tried other cases, because they would
Mm-hmm.
never let somebody who's a first year public defender try a case like this. So it's got to be somebody with experience who's tried a
Mm-hmm.
lot of cases. And judges are not always nice at the end of the case. Judges
Mm-hmm.
don't always have nice things to say about lawyers at the end of the case. And this judge did at the end of the case, which for people that are watching this case and maybe thinking, how could the judge say that? They didn't do a good enough job crossing this witness or calling enough witnesses. Need to realize this isn't the first time the judge has seen you try a case.
No.
And forget about trying a case. It's not the first time a judge has seen you litigate a case, because we
Mm-hmm.
do years of preparation and work on a case before we get the couple days or a couple weeks of trial. So it's not all about just what happens in trial. And I think that's really
Mm-hmm.
more of shining a light on what the judge is saying is, no, maybe he didn't think that Crystal gave the most groundbreaking closing argument that's going to be studied in law schools for the rest of
Please.
time.
Right. Don't do
But
that.
he looks at the case and knows what you did and knows how you work and knows how you work on other cases, and just said you did a good job making sure he had his constitutional rights, which I think, like I said in another video, could have an effect on the appellate process personally.
Mm-hmm.
And should give us a mind into how judges look at this as opposed to lay people watching the case, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what is your role now in the appellate process? Do you guys have an appellate section in the PD's office? That's what we have here. So how does that
Mm-hmm.
work when a case gets appealed that you try?
Well, I guess the first thing I want to say is I think a lot of people were anticipating an appeal. The type of case that it is, and with the conviction, there's always going to be an appeal. It's a part of the process. So, no one should be surprised that when there's a conviction on a homicide case, it immediately goes into an appeal. I mean, sometimes I'm sure that the defendant chooses not to do that, and that's totally within their right, but it's also super within their right to appeal. So as far
And
as
if you were going to prison for the rest of your life, you'd probably appeal too, no matter what.
absolutely,
It's like, what
absolutely,
option do you have? Just go sit in prison for the rest of your life or appeal?
absolutely, and like at the end of the day, it's a process that if everything is done right, doesn't change anything. And I would hope that people appreciate the fact that the way our constitution is, that it guarantees that if something was wrong, if the state did something wrong, we're going to correct it and fix it. So I would hope that that's the something that people get from the appellate process. But our office does have an appellate division. We just file a notice to let the courts know that it is going to be appealed. And then all of our information, so personal notes, case notes, everything, that whole complete file. And we had 2 investigators and 2 attorneys. We each have a different file. So that appellate attorney is going to get all that information. They're going to get the transcripts from the trial. They're going to get the transcripts from any kind of pretrial hearing that we had. And that's pretty much my role. If the appellate attorney reaches out and has questions, obviously I have to answer that. And if there is an issue where something we did or didn't do comes to question, there's going to be a hearing on that. So we'll have to, if that does become something, we'll have to participate with that. But otherwise, we really don't have much to do with the appellate. And it makes sense, right? You don't want the trial attorney to handle something that's a review. You want fresh eyes.
Right.
Yeah, and it probably, I think, just because of the type of case. So even though there's a public defender's office, there is still conflicts within that office.
Right.
So same with our appellate division. I don't think that someone from our appellate division per se is going to handle the case. It might go out of office, but it's still a public defender case.
Right. Yeah. And we private lawyers keep all the files for years and years, just waiting for an
Mm-hmm.
ineffective assistance of counsel claim to come eventually. A lot of times, if we lose a criminal case, we actually will handle the first appeal and we'll do certain things. Then maybe later something like that will happen. But
Mm-hmm.
it's just part of the job. And you understand that. Yeah, and you don't take offense, right?
No.
Like you may take offense to people in my comments saying like you sucked and just you didn't do enough and it's ineffective assistance of counsel, but we really don't take offense when a client does it because you look at it and you say I'd probably do the same thing if I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at prison for the rest of my life or however many years. It's like
Mm-hmm.
you take your chance, you let you let a lawyer take a second look at it, seeing if we miss something, seeing if there's some way to get you out or get you another trial because you don't really have any other option, right? So we don't take
Mm-hmm.
an offense when clients do it for the most part.
No,
At least, for me personally, I wouldn't take an offense if a client did that, knowing they're going to prison for the rest of their life.
I agree
Um,
with you.
so this is a question you don't have to answer, but just kind of as a wrap, reflecting and sitting back and looking at the trial. Do you think you did everything to provide Chandler with a fair trial and uphold his constitutional rights?
So I've thought about this question a lot. I've thought about this case probably every day since trial. And a lot of that has to do with just the personal attacks that we were getting ourselves. Like I anticipate people not liking Chandler, and to put it lightly. I never anticipated it being something that people would attack me about and comment me and my skills and say you suck and comments about this and that. So for a lot of reasons, I think about this case. But as far as the actual question, I don't think I can answer it with a yes or no. I think
Okay.
it's a complex question. Um, what I can say is that if there's something, bringing it back to what you were saying earlier, if there is something that we messed up on, if there's something that we didn't do, I will happily. I don't care about my own, defending myself. I want to make sure that this person, whoever that person is going to get whatever opportunity, whatever chances to make sure that everything is done right. So in a roundabout way, whatever ends up happening, I'm happy to participate to make sure that everything is done right. But
And just
I can't,
so
yeah.
and just so people know, and for yourself, I'm sure you know this, but just a story as some comfort, if nothing else. I go to a couple conferences, and one of the guy that leads a huge PI conference got a multi-billion-dollar verdict that was overturned on appeal
Mm-hmm.
because of the way he questioned a couple witnesses and things that he did himself. One
Yeah.
of the best lawyers I know, one of the best trial lawyers who's got some of the biggest verdicts in the world, a case overturned on appeal because of what he did.
Yeah.
And it's like he tried to make strategic decisions. He tried to try the case the best he could. The jury was with him and picked up everything he was putting down.
Mm-hmm.
And the court thought didn't do the way he should. And this
Yeah.
defendant gets a new trial. And you know what? That happens sometimes.
Does, yeah.
And I think that's a fair answer. And I think that if it happens, it doesn't mean, go find something else to do. Right. And I think
Right.
that's what some people in the media or some mean commenters would potentially say. But everything's a learning experience. We learn a lot when we lose, learn a lot when we win. And I think that's a good way to kind of look at the process as a whole. To just kind of wrap as we'll see what happens, but whatever happens, win or lose on appeal, does not affect your ability to keep being a public defender and defending clients and doing your best at it.
Yeah. I mean, I love my job. I love the clients that I represent, even the quote unquote monsters, because I learn so much from them. I get new experiences from them. The cases that I lose are the ones that I end up learning the most from. The cases that I win, I think I did everything perfect, which is not true. But it's a different. It's just different when the media and the world is out there to see it.
Yeah, it definitely is different. It definitely changes things a bit. But I
Definitely.
really appreciate you coming on. Really
Yeah.
brave to kind of face the music here. I'm sure the commenters will have stuff to say. Take it easy, guys. Don't be crazy. We'll delete anything too crazy anyway, so nobody will get to see your harshness. But this was really fun. Maybe we'll do a follow-up in the future to talk more about it if something happens in the appeal, or if it goes away, denied, and then we could talk more about specifics or something, that would be cool. Or if some other case comes up and we talk about this was fun. I mean, a random person that I've never met and never spoken to before, pretty easy interview and discussion. So I appreciate it. I really do.
Yeah, no, this was awesome, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. Just I don't want to defend myself. I want people to know that there are certain constitutional rights. There are certain people that back up those rights. We have to just, everyone was doing their job, period. And I appreciate you allowing me to have that opportunity.
Is there anything else you want to explain that you think people might not understand before we go?
I did see that follow-up video that you did, and I think you did a great job. Like, point blank, if it is in the Constitution, if someone wants a trial, they're going to get a trial. It does not matter what I say as an attorney. It does not matter what anyone else says. It is the defendant's constitutional right for a jury trial. And if you understand that, and you understand that there is a defense side and a prosecution side, and that's how the system is, and you just respect that, that's all I ask. Just a lot of people were saying Bill did a great job, and Bill's one of the prosecutors, and the judge did a great job for doing their job. We were doing our jobs too. We just had a different, a different side to literally defend.
People don't realize how easy it is to be a prosecutor on cases like that.
It's so easy.
You get to look like a champion of justice. Oh, gosh.
It's so easy. And like Bill and I like to think that we're friends. I deal with Bill a lot because we have a lot of cases, and he's the type of individual that doesn't necessarily take work home with him or make things personal, and same here. So we are constantly interacting in that way. But man, when it was difficult. It's so easy to be a prosecutor. It is so easy when you have certain cases. And you also, you're doing a good job. You're representing victims. It's no problem. I think at some point I was like, Bill, if Starbucks is giving you the endorsement, I'm going to be really freaking angry. Okay. I demand some coffee out of this, especially when my coffee drinking was the comment section.
Exactly. You brought the attention to him.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. This was fun.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you like this content, please share it with your friends. Make sure you subscribe to our page and like our videos. If you want some interaction, get in the comments and we'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to know any more information about our firm or this page, you can find out in the description or visit tragoslaw.com. We post multiple times throughout the week, so make sure you hit that bell so you can get the notification and not miss out on the next episode.